So as you guys know, One Punch Man Season 2 just came out just a few days ago on April 9th, April 10th. It reminded me of a few different things that I'm gonna compile together, and together today we're talking about dreams. See the lessons what we can take from One Punch Man, from Pierre White, and also Zima Blue, and we'll see how we'll look at what dreams are, how to achieve them, what happens beyond those dreams. Before we move on, please hit subscribe and also the notification bell, because apparently the notification bell is more important than the actual subscription itself. Okay, so here we go. One Punch Man! So One Punch Man is this modern day, it's a modern day anime. So if you're any kind of anime fans at all, you know that it has a very good business model, right? It eliminates all fillers. The fillers are not great. It's like,
be as strong as you have become. Such awesome power. I have an old enemy who must be defeated at all costs. Though the battle is not for me alone, it is for my entire hometown.
One Punch Man, it's in the name, right? So he's the strongest hero that you will ever find. And he will punch his way through any kinds of his problems, any enemies that he has in one punch. But even though he's the strongest hero in the universe, right? And we've talked about this a little bit in the last video. He still shows a weakness, right? And the weakness is, well, he has reached the status of he can kill anything else with one punch, but he loses his drive of doing it. Where's the fun in it if there's no challenge? Right? That's the whole concept here. But in the end, he's just this humble person, right? Saitama, the protagonist of the show, he's a very humble person, but deep down inside, he actually really wants recognition and wants to be a hero, but he's just not getting it. So you see, that reveals a very human side of things, where you want something, but you just cannot get it. I want to make eating cookies like eating vegetables. I want to not drink kombucha, and I want to make eating steak all day is also okay. Saitama is paired up with this metallic cyborg, and this metallic cyborg is called Genos, and it's a very funny thing because Genos is portrayed as this mechanical superhero who on paper is basically one of the best heroes that you can ever find. We all know that he's so much weaker than Saitama, and he realizes this and he wants to become his student. Man, there's so much parallel to this story in accordance to Asian countries, right? If you're from Southeast Asia or Asian countries, we're developed. We're brought up with this, you know, the fist of the Iron Dragon Mama lady, which basically says that we have to work hard. We have to work really hard, strive for our best, and this is what exactly happens, right? We're striving our best to understand, and we know how to work the system, that we're so good at it that, I don't know if you know this, but Harvard basically discriminates against the minorities, the Asians, admissions. So it was something ridiculous. If there was no discrimination, there would be like 120% more, or was it 20% more Asians in Harvard or something. Asians don't really care, right? We're hardened in ourselves like Kung Fu Panda. We're hardened to the soul, to the core. So if you go like, oh, sorry, man, you have to do, oh, no problem. You make our admission test harder, no problem. I do even more. I do 200%, 250%. You name price, I do it. So this is the concept. Genos is mechanical, right? It's symbolically mechanical, and this is a funny concept. So for my German viewers, you know that if you get 1,0, which, you know, is the equivalent of like CGPA 4.0, like most industries don't really care too much about 1,0 or CGPA 4.0. I mean, they do a little bit, but most of the times people who are like this are very rigid, right? You have a very strict line that you follow. When you're following such rigid structures, and you know, you become great project managers in the end, but your creativity is just a little bit, you know, your trait in openness is a little bit lower, right? You can't think outside the box, and most probably your personality is a bit, well, maybe you're a little introverted, maybe, so it depends, right? So there are always good uses for this, but it's not the best things to strive for the best all the time, because in the end it'll become a well-oiled, cold, mechanical thing, just like a cyborg. If you guys don't know anime always has this recipe, and in this story it's no different. The anime has the recipe of this. This is one guy who's the underdog, right? Who's learning the ropes, and who doesn't know too much, but he has a spirit in him to always strive and win something better. And this is the beauty of this Japanese anime, that you always have, you don't know things, but you always strive to go for the best. And then you always get paired up with a rival or someone who's always better. You can either be better looking, you can either be better at your skills, you're so technical at certain things, but always the rival is always lacking spirit. Okay, we've seen this everywhere. So whether it's Sakuragi or Rukawa from Slam Dunk, or Goku and Vegeta from Vegeta, whatever it is, from Dragon Ball Z. So in this story, in this exact story in One Punch Man, Genos is also he's not better in terms of skills of killing people in one punch, but he's better looking and he's also tall. And we also know that in life, if you're tall and you're good looking, oh man, you're models just get free passes to everything, right? So if you pair that up with intelligence, oh my god, the world will spread its legs for you. But the rivalry is important. The rivalry is important because you need to understand that there's always an Asian that's better than you. But you shouldn't hate the person who's better. You should always use him as a means to step up your game and use him as a challenge, right? In these kinds of stories, in these kinds of animes, you always see the hero fail at certain things because he's learning the ropes, but then he always gets up again. I get knocked down, but I get up again. It's basically the whole ethos of any kind of hero. You will see this repeated again and again, like in Spider-Man or some other things that I'm not thinking about right now. It's if you're good at something, you should not always be good. I know academics who know certain people who are really intelligent and really brilliant in their minds, but they don't want to work with him because he always wants to show that he's brilliant and superly intelligent and so on and so on. So if you read this paper from Jaak Panksepp, I hope I'm saying his name right, he studied the idea of rats. And he tickled rats for a reason, weirdly enough, right? You spent $50,000 grant in academia just to tickle rats. But what he found was something that's interesting. He found out that rats also like to wrestle. Now if you pair up a small little rat and a bigger rat, they'll do this over and over again, this rough and tumble play process, right? But the weird part about it is, or the interesting part about it is, the bigger rat will always win. But after about a few times of going at it and winning, the smaller rat somehow then feels, I don't want to play anymore. Dude, stop being so big of a rat. And the same thing goes as for human beings, right? You always have to have good sportsmanship. You don't want to be a sore loser. Neither do you want to be a sore winner, right? Sometimes you just tend to, I'll lose to a small kid so that he feels like he's winning. It's the idea of that behavior, how you step up and rank up on that game of hierarchies in human societies. So the idea is this: take the competition as a means for you to step up, but never overstep and make the other person feel like they're losing out, because that's not how humans work. It's represented across biology. It's not really a human thing, it's a very biological thing. Even animals that we have this. And the other point is, so the main point about it is we do not want to work ourselves too hard to point to become a mechanical, a mechanical cyborg. And if you move on, this is in parallel to Zima Blue. Zima Blue is also one of the episodes in Love, Death and Robots. And in this show, it's also brilliantly shown he started off as a small little cyborg and he grew up to be this big thing who wanted to show the world and get recognition from the universe. So basically what he did was he painted the color Zima Blue because it's his color, and he painted it across the world, and in the end he ended up painting it across the universe. He literally went out and painted the whole freaking universe, only to find out that the success that you get is cold. The dreams that you have is not fulfilling, right? It's something that is mechanical. It feels like a well-oiled, something's missing. So in the end he dumbed down and went to the simple things, and in his final art piece he destroyed himself, becoming this small little robot, returning to humble beginnings to find peace and find meaning in their life. There's a lot of parallel to this, bringing on this to Marco Pierre White. For those who do not know who Marco Pierre White is, he's a brilliant chef and a brilliant person, I think, in my estimation. He's the youngest, I think he was the youngest English person who got the 3 Michelin stars, but he also taught Gordon Ramsay. Fuck off! What? "You bloody what? It's raw!" And then you just kick everything. All this tantrum and hate, it's needed in that field of work, because if you don't do it, if you do not have that discipline, you will not get great. Or most of his rhetoric came from Marco Pierre White. Marco Pierre White is also, now that he's mature, he has a life story.
And when I go down the streets of the world that I was born into, I think it's not a world I recognize anymore, because we were brought up to better ourselves. It was as simple as that.
He tells his life story at his Oxford Union, and you see, he tells his tale about how much he had a dream by the time he was 16, 17.
I worked so hard, and I pushed myself so hard. And you know something? The truth is, had it not been for that man, who was not a nice man, I would never have realized my dreams. Because he gave me the tools required. He taught me how to absorb pressure, how to push, how to pick up the towel, how to hide my tears. Because the old world of gastronomy was Escoffier's world. It was like a factory floor. They were hard men, all from humble beginnings. A tough world.
And but it's combined with luck, perseverance, but that drive, the ambition to get to be the best chef in the world, arguably the best chef in the world. It's a sprint. It's always hard work. It's always running and hitting the treadmills every day, you know. And then once he got that Michelin 3 stars, you know, getting there is always an offense, but getting back is, you know, maintaining the 3-star restaurant, it's defense. It's a lot of work, and it becomes more of a well-oiled machine. Like, okay, now I've got 3 Michelin stars. If I want to maintain it, then I have to have like 70, 80 employees just to take care of 100 customers, 100 tables. So in the end, he said what he likes, he doesn't want Michelin stars anymore. He wants to go back to humble beginnings, where he came back as a farmer, or not farmer, you know, coming from rural areas. Now we hear all this all the time, right? And it seems hard to believe, but maybe there is some truth in that. And maybe the reason why it's hard for us to believe is because we also have to trudge through that past and experience those things ourselves. So we have to learn the lesson the hard way, right? But it's always nice to know that in the end, your dreams, whatever it is, we have to find opportunities where they are, and you have to follow it. It doesn't really matter if that dream is yours or not. And for him, and for most people, a lot of people that I've talked to, you know, they've achieved this grand design that they wanted, the ambitions and the dreams, and in the end, only to find out that it's not really the reason why. I mean, that's one of the. You just look at academia today, right? You go and study your bachelor's, you study like cramp millions of things overnight or over 2 weeks for your exam, and then 5 hours after the exam, you don't even remember what it is that you study for. Why are you even studying in the first place if it's not for gaining knowledge, right? But in the end, you will see for these chefs, it's not about how well the food tastes. It's nothing to do with how well your work is presented or how well your work is finished. I mean, it is important, but the more important thing is living in that moment, right? It's having the conversations while you're waiting for the food and post-food, or while you're eating the food. It's living in that moment and having a nice time with people, your social relationships. That is the most important thing. And this is actually portrayed, you know, there's studies on this. The Harvard Generational Study looks at a subset of people who lived from before the war and lived all the way to after the war. And obviously, most of the people who survived are way past 90 years old, and there's only a handful of them who actually survived. But what they found out is when they were younger, they wanted money and fame, right? That's the key to life, money and fame. But then when they were asked again, years and years after, when they were old, it seems like, you guessed it, it's social ties, right? It's your relationships between you and your family and your friends, It's living in that moment, in that present moment, to have face-to-face conversations with the people. It's not whatever this is. This is like massaging your tiny little waifu. So it's not texting and everything else. It's living in that moment. If you heard of Pierre White is this. He has this. His voice is he has the voice of an angel. It's like as if Morgan Freeman and David Attenborough somehow made a baby together. Person who, you know, not only speaks well, but God, he's just amazing. So if you haven't seen Pierre White in his essence, please watch that video, his address at Oxford Union. But what's annoying to me, final take, what's annoying to me is listening to his voice and listening to his stories and the experience that he tells. You see this somewhat young lady next to him, which is not listening to anything that he's saying. Nothing against that lady, but it's symbolic of how our society are growing up today. We're losing that peace of the mind of, you know, we want to either achieve too much and not think about anything else. And we're losing, at the same time, we're also losing that part of living in the moment. It's not uncommon these days that you sit at a restaurant and you eat, and then people are just looking at their phones and like, ha ha ha, look at that Instagram over there. Like, what? Put the phone down, talk to the person, peer them into the eyes and peer into their souls, and ask them, how are you? And learn their name, for God's sakes. Look at how Pierre White was talking about.
Albert at Le Gavroche. One was called Malcolm Reed, and the other was called Colin Long. The great Michel Bourdin at the Connaught, his name was Michael Truelove. The head chef was a man called Michael Lawson. Michel Roux at the Waterside Inn, and Michael Lawson at the Box Tree.
I mean, he remembers all these names so well, and the name has a lot of worth, right? Why not, instead of doing that, you sit down, you look at the person, you talk to them face to face, and then you find out how they are, live in the present moment, do not care about anything else. Like, you know, if you wanted to talk or rant or something on Twitter, just, you can do that at home. Don't do it in the company of other people. Okay, so I've gone along way too much. Moral of the story is, please watch animes and listen to Pierre White while you're cooking, because his voice is so succulent. And put those phones down, right? Just talk to the people, live in the moment, remember their names. And if you like this show, you can hit the subscribe button, and on the other side, you can also hit the notification bell if you want. I don't know if you like it. If you don't like it, I don't know. But that will really help you out. Okay, peace. Okay.